Hey folks, it's Chris, and today I want to talk to you about what to do when we harvest our ginger root and some of the techniques to do that, because it's not going to be the same thing actually that you would find in the grocery store. But before we do that, I also want to remind you that we did talk about starting or pre-sprouting our ginger indoors, and so you can find a link to that video in the description below. And also, before we get to actually processing or harvesting this ginger root, I want to talk to you and show you some of the different ways that we have grown ginger this year. And the ginger that we're going to be working on today was actually grown hydroponically in hydroponic buckets in a soilless media, or perlite essentially. And this ginger was grown by Dr. Shelby Henning with Western Illinois University. He is the horticulture professor there. And we have been partnering together to grow, I would say, different or unique types of crops that may not be so traditional here in the Midwest. So ginger, of course, being one, and also we're looking into growing turmeric. There's a lot of different methods to grow ginger. Now, for many years I have been growing them in containers, and I really enjoy growing them in fabric containers, and that was one of the things that we were going to do this year in 2020, but 2020 being the year that it is, a lot of things had to be shelved, so we've had to improvise. And so actually at home I've taken to growing a lot of the ginger plants in just some plastic containers that we had lying around, and they've done really well. So when it comes to the growth habit of ginger, it's very similar to potatoes. So the ginger root, it actually grows up and out, and so you have to continually mound soil over top of the emerging roots that are coming out of the soil, and that's the process called hilling. And so this works really well when growing in containers, and that's something that in some of our containers that we have, we've just been adding potting soil then onto the container to hide the exposed ginger root as it continues to grow up and out. We also do have ginger growing in the ground, and so one of the locations that we are doing this here is at the McDonough County Extension Office, and we, of course, we got them planted late because of a lot of the issues that have come up with this year, but we have put them in these raised beds, and I'm very pleased with how they've come along. It's a similar process, as I said once again with containers, that you do have to keep an eye on the roots as they grow up and out, and make sure that you hill soil or compost on the exposed roots. In terms of fertility and fertilizers, essentially it's kind of like tomatoes. If you've grown tomatoes, it's a similar routine fertilizer schedule, because one of the issues how ginger requires nutrients is it requires quite a bit more, because typically you don't see those fine feeder roots on the ginger rhizomes when they're growing in the ground. So because you don't see many of those feeder roots, that means that you have to really apply that nutrition right next to where the plant is growing, and fairly frequently, because especially with nutrients like nitrogen, that can leach out of the soil pretty quickly. So when we planted our ginger here, essentially we cut a furrow using a digging hoe, and we measured out the ginger and we spaced them using our drip irrigation tape. Wherever the emitters were, we put a ginger plant that we pre-sprouted inside, and we planted these out, and we have them on a drip irrigation system. And fertility for these guys outside, for the most part, every time we hill, we apply a liquid fertilizer. A weekly fertilizer should also be applied, injected through the drip irrigation system. Again, similar to the ratios that a tomato might receive. But we're not entirely sure on fertility with ginger here in the Midwest, and that's one of the things that the group, Dr. Henning, myself, and several others across the state who are going to be growing this plant are trying to figure out in terms of fertility, the timing for planting out and harvesting, and even marketability. So we have a lot to learn about this crop, but it's really exciting and really fun to grow. Let me show you an instance here where it's evident that the ginger has grown up far enough that we need to hill it, to add more soil to the base of the plant. You'll see that the rhizome has obviously poked its head above the soil surface. You might see either kind of that white fleshy part or pink flesh of that rhizome coming up out of the ground. That's the indicator that it's time to hill that ginger and cover up that root. And by hilling that plant and adding soil to it, you will actually then promote a larger root system, which means a bigger harvest for you at the end of the growing season. So really, as you can see, the ginger that we pull out of the ground looks a lot different than the ginger that we might get at the grocery store. So grocery store ginger is known as mature ginger. Essentially, it's been pulled from the ground, and it's allowed to essentially cure and form the skin on the outer side of the root. And you know that skin, if you've ever used ginger in cooking, you have to peel that skin off. And mature ginger is often very fibrous, and so you have to use, mince it very well, or use a very fine grater or micro grater in order to try to reduce that fibrous texture of that ginger that we get at the grocery store. However, with the ginger that we pull fresh from the ground, this is known as immature ginger, or a very common name for it is baby ginger. This root here has not developed that thick skin on the outside, and so we don't have to peel it. And in fact, only thing we really have to do to add this to our cooking is just grate it or mince it into whatever food or dish that you are preparing. So it's pretty simple. And in terms of long-term storage, what you have to do for this is you just throw it in the freezer. And then when you need a little bit for, say, a stir fry, you just grab it out of the freezer, you grate a little bit of that in the pan where you're cooking it, put it back in the freezer, and you can keep that going for months. We are going to process this ginger here and show you how it's done. So again, this was grown hydroponically, so it has some perlite still stuck within here. We're going to wash that off, remove a lot of these fine root hairs from here, and then we are going to see you on the other side. Okay, so we have washed our ginger, and very often you'll be left with something like this. We still have this nice root attached right here with the shoot. Now, in terms of storage for you, as I said, we're just going to be tossing this portion in the freezer. So what you would have to do is just cut off any green growth on top, and you would toss it in the freezer, and you're done. You can just, again, take that out and use it in whatever fresh foods that you would need baby ginger for. But let's say you are a vegetable grower and you have decided to incorporate ginger as, say, part of your farmer's market stand or a CSA. How do you present that to the public? Well, probably one of the best ways is, first of all, as you're processing this, making sure that you're giving away, or not giving away, but selling appropriately sized pieces. You know, something like this, a few ounces in weight, that's a pretty good sized piece of ginger. And in terms of sales, when it comes to fresh ginger, I know when you buy the stuff at the grocery store, it can be anywhere from $5 to $6 per pound. Fresh ginger, because it's pretty unique. It's a unique crop. In some parts of the U.S. here, goes for as much as $20 a pound. So probably not typical here in the Midwest, but there are some markets here that do gain a lot of money from this novel crop. So what good way to present this to the public is to take your scissors or pruners here and you cut off the green growth and leave about an inch of this growth right here on top. And then as you present this, say at a farmer's market, you have to keep this cool, so it's good to, similar to how you would keep your lettuces cool at a farmer's market, keep it on ice or something like that. And then have signage and things like that to educate consumers about what to do with this ginger, because as we've mentioned before in this video, it's simple. Put it in the freezer, pull it out, grate it into your dish, put it back in the freezer, and that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video about growing and harvesting fresh ginger. You can do it right here in Illinois. We can grow this tropical crop. You can have this on hand all year long, so long as you keep your freezer well stocked with fresh baby ginger. And if you have any questions, please feel free. My contact information is below in the video description. And as always, thank you for watching. Keep on growing.